Cutting sugar cane by hand is really hard work. Before the revolution in 1959, it was the only work the people could get. They worked 16 or 17 hours for about 50 cents a day, and the harvest lasted only 3 months. Sugar companies in the U.S. owned most of the land, and they weren't worried about what happened to their workers during the rest of the year, or about to the rest of the land. Things have changed. The cattle, citrus, coffee, rice, and fish industries are growing. Sugar is still the most important crop, but the Cubans believe that cutting cane by hand is incompatible with the kinds of lives they want to live. People need to be free to do other work, but the purchase and production machinery depends on successful harvests.
The task that people were doing so enthusiastically and working so hard to do in a way that expressed communism, expressed the way they wanted to live, was such a shitty task. I mean, it was such hard work and something that people wanted to eliminate. And the reason they were working so hard was to eliminate the need for people to have to do that kind of work.
The goal in 1970 was a harvest of 10 million tons of sugar. Volunteers from schools and factories went out to the fields. It was the most important thing happening in Cuba, and people were working together for a harvest that would bring them more hospitals, schools, and houses. At the end of the harvest, they had reached 8.5 million tons, 1.5 million tons short of the 10 million goal. It was the largest sugar yield in the history of Cuba.
Talking about the 10 million tons and saying, what does it mean if they only cut in tons? It's the same thing. It's just beautiful, you know, because of what happens to the human being, you know, doing this, you know, and having to deal with all kinds of people and things in their personality, like competition. That the 10 million tons meant, you know, it's a process of making the new man and the new woman. You know, that each year when there's a goal set, you know, that it's a part of that.
Friends of Cuba from all over the world came in the fields. Brigades from Vietnam, North Korea, Africa, and Latin America joined the Cubans in the battle against the cane. 2 brigades of young North Americans also took part in the harvest. The groups consisted of blacks, Puerto Ricans, Mexican Americans, American Indians, Asian Americans, and whites, who were all sympathetic to the revolution in Cuba.
The only fear my father had, he didn't want me to come at the beginning because he was afraid I'd stay in Cuba. I wouldn't come back. That says something of how he feels, you know. There must be something good down there about, you know, he's afraid I'd stay.
Back and talk, and not talk of what we have read or what someone has told us, but what we, with our own eyes, with our own ears, with our own speaking to people, not just even the Cubans, the young communists in our brigades, speaking with the workers that are by us, that work in the tobacco field, the knowledge that we have gained of the Cuban people, of the children that we see living in the houses of their parents, that we will be able to come back to the United States and give the lie to them, that we will be able to show and to say, from the knowledge that we have seen that is a reality, that what exists in Cuba is not a land of forced labor camps, is not a land of starvation and poverty, is not a land that compares with the illiteracy and the hunger that is practiced in the United States.
Maybe it's my prejudice, but I don't think I've ever seen a prettier city than Havana. It's gorgeous the way you come into it, into the harbor.
Venceramos! 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 Venceramos!
We're pulling into the dock in Havana.
What I think that has happened is that as we first came down here, as we started to go out into the fields in the morning, we found we had a very practical enemy, so to speak. We had the cane to cut. We know that, we have positions on certain days, but we have begun to respect each other much more through our very practical coming together on work. And this is something that will not stop when we leave Cuba. This is something that we can take back as an experience. This is something that we can show our brothers and sisters back in the United States. This is something that is going to be very necessary in the struggle that we all have to wage back home.
The heat is something we're not used to. Work is something we're not used to. Diet, all factors of living. That it's an entirely different concept when you're out there with your machete in that field. The cane lies down, the cane stands up, it even attacks you, literally. The concept, just when we first hit this field, is totally alien of work for people, for all the people, not for some of the people. And as this concept comes home to you, you begin to find in you a strength that's not physical. It's a strength that comes from within your heart. And they begin to understand the struggle that each man must wage within himself. And that out of the self-discipline comes a new way of looking at your fellow man. That he is not someone who's trying to devour you, someone who's trying to take from you, but someone who's trying to help you.
Like when you put sugar in your coffee every morning or things like that in the U.S., like you don't really think of how much labor went into it, And like from now on, like probably through the rest of my life, like every time I see a tab of sugar, like I want to think like how much fucking labor went into it, and how like I know like it's much easier to work here because like I know ain't nobody standing over me with no whip.
Los imperialistas acostumbran a medir las cosas en pesos y centavos.
They are used on measuring things in relation to dollars and cents.
Nosotros no medimos las cosas en pesos y centavos.
We do not measure things in dollars and cents.
La medimos por su valor moral.
We measure things because of their moral value.
We have learned is that revolution is about people. The Cubans are revolutionaries because they are concerned about people first. To be a revolutionary today in Cuba means to have a machete in your hand. To be a revolutionary in Vietnam means to have a gun in your hand. To be a revolutionary in Korea means to be a worker working to increase the economic and industrial production of Korea. Revolution is about anything that has to be done in order to secure the needed changes.
What is the relationship of this kind of the revolutionary to the poor people in the country, to people in the countryside, and try to relate that to my own family background. I really was curious about that. I mean, things like medical care. Shit. You know they had medical care. Then you see some older people with false teeth and things like that. Well, hell, my father has 2 teeth. To get money together, enough money in this country to get false teeth. I mean, my God, that's a real luxury. The food. We get surplus food at home, but the shit that you have to go through, because it meant that you had to sell a certain amount of your pride, you know, each time, because of the way they treat you when you go to get the surplus food. You know, that you have to internalize all the shit in the society. You don't say that it's the system. And there, people, you know, obviously they changed the system, you know, and that people had food, you know. I mean, like a guy with one of these tin plates on the wall in Aguacate, he had, you know, had it nailed up on the wall, and that was, you know, it meant something.
One thing I think that all of us, especially third world peoples, have been impressed with is that we have come to Cuba. We have seen that the Cubans work together as human beings, as revolutionaries. They do not make differences between themselves, as they are all working together.
This experience reinforces for me there is the possibility for change, and that's the most important thing that the Cuban Revolution has shown me.